Before I start the video, as a quick reminder, check out my links down below to help support the channel. I am now in partnership with Baron of Dice. They have some awesome TCG accessories like playmats, deck boxes, and dice. And if you want to level up your setup, it is the perfect way to do so. And if you want to support the channel directly and get some sweet perks, consider joining the Patreon. If you want to get early access to videos or even some deck help, Patreon is where it's at. And so without further ado, let's get back into the video. Hey, what's going on YouTube? This is Devin with Jurassic Magic, and in today's video I wanted to make the ultimate Spider-Man list focusing only on Spider-Man cards. And I felt the perfect commander for this option would be the Cosmic Spider-Man, and I know a lot of people don't like this card because of how generic it is. It's basically an Achroma's Will in the command zone, but if you want to put all the Spider-Man cards into one deck, this would be the best option. And just to give you a little warning on this list, with the land base, I decided to make it a more of an optimal land base so that you can play the Spider-Man cards you want. So outside of the land base, all the cards in this deck are going to be all exclusively from the Spider-Man set, whether they're from the Secret Lair, bonus sheet, or the main standard set. And in this video, I'm going to discuss a lot of different stuff, like the staples, a lot of the different spiders you could utilize in the deck, and how we're going to win. And so without further ado, let's get it started and make the ultimate Spider-Man deck. So first things first, let's talk about the Cosmic Spider-Man and how it works. So for Wooburg mana, he has Flying, First Strike, Trample, Lifelink, and Haste. And at the beginning of combat on your turn, other spiders you control gain Flying, First Strike, Trample, Lifelink, and Haste until end turn. So basically, you're giving the Achroma's Will-like effect to all the spiders you control on the battlefield. So if anything else, I would consider this as the win con of the deck. I'm not going to add too much win cons besides a couple of things that I'll mention later. But in this first part of the video, we're going to talk about the basics, the staples we need in order to achieve victory. So that means we need ramp, card draw, and interaction. And there are plenty of options in this set for you. As far as ramp goes, we have plenty of options like the Soul Stone. It taps for black mana only, which is the downside. But if you harness it, you get to reanimate a creature at the beginning of your end step. That is quite powerful. You do also have 3 visits, which will help you search your library for a forest card and put it onto the battlefield and shuffle. You could put in Dark Ritual as another option to get a burst of mana. You could also include Guy in a Chair or a Hot Dog Cart. That'll give you a 1 mana of any color when you tap them. You could also include Spider Manifestation, a great mana dork for the deck. Also, whenever you cast a spell with mana value 4 or greater, untap this creature, so this could give you multiple effects when you're casting those big creatures. So now that I've talked about some ramp, now let's go into some of the card draw. Mary Jane Watson is a prime example of this. Whenever a spider you control enters, you draw a card. This ability only triggers only once each turn. That's completely fine. We're casting spiders here and there. We get to replace them and get more cards into our hand. You could also use some one-time effects like Ponder just to get the right type of card in your hand. Thrill Possibility, Unexpected Windfall, or even Winds of Change. They're not the best card draw options because they don't really get you card advantage. They only really give you card selection. And of course, you could put in the Wedding Ring, where Spider-Man does get married to Mary Jane, and this can work if your opponents are drawing a bunch of cards. But if you want a huge burst of card advantage, Hunter's Insight is an excellent choice. Choose target creature you control. Whenever that creature deals combat damage to a player or planeswalker this turn, draw that many cards. I can't tell you how many times I've used this card in different decks and drawn an insane amount of cards. Of course, it is limited to combat damage, but if you have your commander out, at least you'll get 5 card draw off of it. So now that I've talked about some card draw options, now let's move on and talk about interaction, and that kind of comes in many different forms. There are some great one-off removal spells like Leyline Binding, Path to Exile, or even Terminate. There are some great board wipes like Damnation, Blasphemous Act, or even the new Villainous Wrath, and I know technically it's more of a villain's card, but it does work with our deck because we have black in the color identity. Target opponent loses life equal to the number of creatures they control, then destroy all creatures. This could hose one opponent and make them lose the game, so I thought this would be a neat choice. There are also some great protection spells that you could utilize in this type of deck, like Heroic Intervention, giving your permanents indestructible, and Hexproof. There is also Arachnogenesis. This is a great fog that can make you a lot of spider tokens on the battlefield. And then there's also Strength of Will. Until in a turn, target creature you control gains indestructible, and whenever this creature is dealt damage, put that many +1/+1 counters on us. That can be quite insane, especially if somebody has a huge creature they're swinging with, and we could block them. But of course, how can we forget about the spectacular Spider-Man? We could sacrifice him. Creatures you control gain Hexproof and indestructible until in a turn, so like a Heroic Intervention, but just for your creatures creatures when you sacrifice them. So this is pretty good, but that's all I'm really going to talk about in this section. Of course, there's a lot of other interaction pieces, card draw, and ramp pieces in the deck, but those are just some of my personal favorites that I would like to highlight. But now I wanted to shift my focus into the best Spider-Man and how we could totally utilize them in this type of deck. And so let's first talk about Gwenom Remorseless. This is incredible. A Bolas' Citadel, all on a body, can make you cast a lot of spells for cheap, basically for free, all at the expense of life. Of course, you do have to swing in with her, which is the one downside, but then again, there might be situations where this might be okay because your opponent might not have a blocker. Another version of Spider-Man I like is Superior Spider-Man. This is the version that is basically Dr. Octavius that switch bodies with Peter Parker, and of course it's exemplified in here, having it become a copy of any creature in a graveyard, except he's a 4/4 spider human in addition to his other types. So this is great in situations where we might have a really good creature in a graveyard, or an opponent does. We basically get the best version on our side of the battlefield. Another card I absolutely love is Spider-Punk. This works perfectly with spiders because other spiders you control have Riot, and spells and abilities can't be countered, and damage can't be prevented. Though I will say this does negate the fogs like Arachnogenesis, so I would be cautionary on that. Besides that point, having Riot for all your spiders means that they will get haste on the battlefield or get a +1/+1 counter on them. There might be situations where you might want to go aggressive, or you might want to stack the board with bigger creatures. It is really up to you. Speaking of making your creatures bigger, Miles Morales is perfect because when he enters, you put a +1/+1 counter on each up to 2 target creatures, so including Miles Morales or another creature you control. Of course, you can transform him into the Ultimate Spider-Man, which is a very good card. He has First Strike and Haste. You can also pay 2, put a +1/+1 counter on Ultimate Spider-Man, and he gains Hexproof and becomes colorless until in a turn. But of course, he has a really good attacks trigger. You double the number of each kind of counter on each spider and legendary creature you control. This does have a little bit of a counters theme, putting counters on all your spiders so that you can buff them up. So just doubling those effects can be quite powerful. And because there's a little bit of a modified theme, you could use Arana, Heart of the Spider, and SPDR, basically Spider, piloted by Penny. Each of these are great because they give you some kind of card advantage, whether you're exiling the top card of your library or drawing a card whenever you deal combat damage with a modified creature. And plus, we really do want to put a lot of 1/1 counters on our creatures because, of course, when our commander enters the battlefield, they will gain all those keywords, plus them being buffed up, so that's going to spell good game for your opponents in no time. Of course, we can't have a Spider-Man deck without the Amazing Spider-Man / Peter Parker. Peter Parker is great by himself because he puts a token on the battlefield with him, and when we do transform him, each legendary spell that is 1 or more colors has web slinging Bant color combination, so all those big high CMC spiders will basically be reduced when you web sling them onto the battlefield. But that's not all. Something about the Spider-Verse is the fact that you have a lot of great options as far as win cons go. One option in particular I like is by using Imposter Syndrome. Whenever a non-token creature you control deals combat damage to a player, create a token that's a copy of it, except it's not legendary. So this is absolutely insane, especially with Cosmic Spider-Man and all the other Spider-Men we control on the battlefield. Making extra token copies of them can really increase the rate of how fast the game is going to close out. And if you include something like Parallel Lives, you're making even more token copies of those creatures. Another win con you could utilize in this type of deck is the Spider-Verse. This one is kind of tricky. I like it for that first ability. The legendary rule doesn't apply to spiders you control, and whenever you cast a spell from anywhere other than your hand, you may copy it. If you do, you may choose new targets for the copy. If the copy is a permanent spell, it gains haste and do this only once each turn. This works very well with Gwen Stacy and really any cards that play from exile, and there's a decent number of cards that do this in this list. But what I really like this card for is Rite of Replication. It has that ability to create a token that's a copy of target creature. If the spell was kicked, create 5 of those tokens instead. So if you pay 9 mana on this and copy another creature you control, and if they're legendary, it won't apply because of the Spider-Verse. This could get really out of hand super fast, especially with a card like Parallel Lives on the battlefield, making even more token copies. Just imagine what kind of token copies that are legendary that you can make, like the Ultimate Spider-Man. When you attack with multiple of them, you're constantly doubling the number of kind of counters on each spider you control, so this could really close out the game super fast. Or even if you want a non-legendary option, Web Warriors actually could help you close out the game depending on how much creatures you have on the battlefield. If you kick Rite of Replication onto Web of Warriors, all of them will simultaneously enter the battlefield, and you get to put 5 1/1 counters on each creature you control. So to me, that is pretty insane. It can help you close out the game, especially with your commander out on the battlefield. So with all that said, that is going to do it for me, guys. Thank you guys so much for coming by and watching this video on the Ultimate Spider-Man deck tech, focusing on cards only from the Spider-Man universe, minus the lands, because again, the lands are kind of the hardest part about this list. There's not too many good dual lands that you could utilize, so that's why in this list I put in a lot of optimal lands, so that way you could catch up with the table. Of course, this is more of a bracket 1 style deck, but let me know down below in the comments comments, what would you put in this list? What other cards would you recommend? So if you can, on the way out, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And with that out of the way, thank you for stopping by.